Can we start? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming, the masses. My name is Nick Axel. I am the chair of the Architectural Advisory Board for the Babin Yar Holocaust Memorial Center. And I'm very happy that we can, on the 80th anniversary of the commemoration events, that members of the Architectural Advisory Board and also architects who have worked with us over the past year can come together to present their work, to share their ideas, and then to engage in a discussion about what might be to come at the site of Babin Yar. Babin Yar, of course, is a tragic event, but it is also a very real place still today that is located in the center of the city, which we will be finding out more about. So the Architectural Advisory Board was founded almost a year ago today, and it was founded for the purposes of discussing, reflecting on the meaning and the significance of building a museum, devising strategies and different ways to intervene within the existing landscape of Babin Yar, with historical significance and also with kind of present meaning for the city of Kiev and for the mission of the foundation. I am very happily joined here with a handful of the members. The Architectural Advisory Board is being represented here by Robert Jan van Pelt, Marina Otero-Verzier, and Anna Kamishan. And then on my right, we have Manuel Hertz and Andrea Faraguna, two architects who we have worked with over the past year. And so over the past year, we have been having regular meetings and discussing different ways of taking steps onto the site, of intervening and developing the site of Babin Yar into a place of greater historical significance and resonance with the events that took place there. Through these discussions, a number of architectural projects have emerged, and commissions have been made, one to Manuel Hertz, who is the architect of the Babin Yar Synagogue, and another to Andrea Faraguna, who is one of a principal, I guess, at Sub, who is designing the Kurgan of Memory. So they will be presenting both of their projects. But on top of this, through this space of discussion and exchange, a number of kind of other projects have emerged, one of which will be presented by Robert Jan van Pelt, and has recently resulted in this book, or this book of books, this series of books, a book called How Beautiful Are Your Dwelling Places, Jacob, which is a 2-book volume, one of which is a book on the meaning and significance of architecture, time and space within Judaism by Robert Jan van Pelt and Mark Podval, and another is a documentation of the Babin Yar Synagogue by Manuel Hertz, Galina Andrusenko, and with an extensive photo essay by the photographer Ivan Ban. The 2 books are being published by Park Books, but in the special edition, which is published directly by the Babin Yar Holocaust Memorial Center, we have created a box for these that is itself a model of the synagogue itself. As you will hear more later, the synagogue is inspired by a pop-up book in the way that the elements open and close, and so we have in a way turned the building that is based on a pop-up book back into a pop-up book, where the building was always thought of as a book, and now we are making a book that is a building. With that, I will be also introducing another project that we have done later, and another book that we have published, but I would like to start by giving the floor to Robert Jan van Pelt to make a presentation of his volume, which is, if I can is this book here, an Atlas of Jewish Space. I don't know if you want to take this up with you, but thank you, Robert Jan.
Nick, thank you very much. I'm here to present a joint project that is created with a New York-based artist named Mark Potwell, very well known for his Jewish art, but also for having contributed to the op-ed page of the New York Times for over 50 years. In fact, the first drawing that he published there was on the occasion of the massacre at the Munich Olympic Games of 1972. So he's a man who was, even as a young man, felt kind of comfortable with kind of difficult topics. Now, I'm going to time myself using my father-in-law's watch. Jakob Grünbaum is the only survivor of his family. He came actually from Krakow. And his family was killed in 1942-43. All the women in Belzec, all the men were shot in 2 shootings. But he survived everything, inclusive Auschwitz and a death march. And for me, this watch is very important because it is the first thing of value that he bought after the war to, in some way, attest to the fact that he was alive and that he had a future. He bought this in late 45 on the Munich black market, the Jewish black market, the Mottstrasse. So when I talk about the Holocaust, I always like to have this watch with me to remind me that that also there is an after story to this. So, sorry. I didn't know this was up. So, Jewish space. Early on in the work of the architecture board for the Baba Yar Foundation, I proposed to give a talk on the Jewish understanding of space, which is actually very different from, let's call, Gentile, Christian understanding of space, non-Jewish understanding of space. And of course, that has to do both with the experience of exile, but also with the basic teachings in the Bible. And in some way, the image with which the book starts is all of these images are by Mark Potwell, is that of a very popular theme, Fiddlers on the Roof. Basically, the idea of the Luftmenschen, the air people, and this is how Jews called themselves here in the Ukraine. They were Luftmenschen. They were people who had no really good relationship to the soil, but in some way they survived miraculously. And you already start to see that this in some way starts to shape a different sense of what space is and what place is than a peasant would have, for example, or a person who is secure in his or her life. And so here we have a drawing called Yiddish typewriter, but you see here the image of the shtetl, the Ukrainian shtetl that comes out of the typewriter. And one of the things that you see is it seems to be a very densely packed mass of houses. And when we go to Sholem Aleichem, of course, a great Ukrainian Jewish writer, he talks about the shtetl, and he says very interestingly, in the shtetl you never have any place for streets or public spaces. Why would you waste space for that? And so this whole idea of a public space in Judaism, according to Sholem Aleichem, is actually absent. The only public space in a sense that Jews really had was a cemetery. It was quite often the only space that actually a Jewish community could own. Jews were not allowed to own property, typically in this area or in most of Europe until the emancipation of the 19th century. So what is your relationship to place when you cannot own it? Yeah, when you always in some way are on a short lease. And so here we have the Jewish cemetery in Prague, and you get these places that cannot be expanded, but Jews also are not allowed to clear graves. So you get this incredible crowding of basically dead people in a single place, which makes actually for a very uncanny space. And then the whole question of what actually is a cemetery. Is a cemetery a place of endings, or is a cemetery actually a part of a chain? And in the Jewish tradition, the cemetery is actually about a place where you go to understand the chain of generations. So here we see tombstones that are in some way hanging as leaves from a tree, but the tree is a tree of life. So again, you see there a kind of very strange, kind of counterintuitive idea that the cemetery is in fact a place of life, of the continuation of life, not of the life of the individual, but of the life of the family, of the people. And this is also why cemeteries in Hebrew are called the house of life, not the house of death. So here we have then a picture where we then get another kind of paradox of Jewish history. When we look at most peoples, we look at Buddhist traditions, we look at Native American traditions, we look at Christian traditions. The idea of space tends to be an idea of space that is developed within the culture itself. That is, you can say there is a clear Buddhist understanding of what the stupa is and so on. But when we look actually at the Jewish understanding of space, you see in this image of Potwell, we see the Torah, but out of that we get actually two roads. One of them is that of the temple, Jerusalem, the menorah, and so on. But on the other side, we see the menorah upside down. It becomes the train tracks to Auschwitz. We see in the end, we see Birkenau, barracks, and a crematorium. And so in the Jewish tradition, because the identity of the Jew, the fact that Jews still exist, is only because we have been persecuted for 2,000 years. If we had not been persecuted, if it wasn't for anti-Semitism, we wouldn't exist anymore. We would have disappeared as a nation. But it's only the hatred and the persecution that has forced us to remain in this world. This means that Jewish space is not only the space that emerges within Judaism as a kind of positive, but it also includes some spaces of persecution. And for example, Babi Yar. So then when we go back to the kind of great scriptural tradition of Judaism, and here we have an early pen drawing of the Tower of Babel, it's actually the way the Bible talks about space is completely opposite to any other people. The Tower of Babel story is a critique of the idea of the center, of the sacred center. It is about dispersion. And so in the Jewish tradition, what counts from very early on is not the center but the periphery. It is the story of Abraham, who destroys the idols of his father, as the Talmud says, and the Midrash says, story that he destroys the gods and he leaves the town in which he lives. Now, normally in antiquity, when you leave the place where you have been born, that means death. Yeah? There are many mythologies. You always need to return to the place of origin. But Abraham leaves the place of origin, never to return anymore. He goes from Ur, he goes to Palestine. He goes to the edge of the world to basically recreate himself. And that, of course, is an important thing about the Jewish tradition, that in some way you always go to the edge to in some way create a new beginning. And so here, this is my book plate that Mark Potwell created for me for this project, Reuven ben Yochanan, my Hebrew name. And it's about the Temple of Solomon, the Temple of Jerusalem, now here presented as a book also. But the Temple of Jerusalem is actually the exception to the rule. It's an aberration in Jewish history. It actually was, the moment it was built, it was already criticized mercilessly by the prophets, by many groups. The temple was an idea, was an embodiment of royal power, which actually had no place amongst the Israelites and the Judahites and later the Jews. So when Jews think about the temple, or other people look at the Temple of Jerusalem and think, oh, that was it, and the destruction was really a catastrophe for the Jews. No, the destruction was the best thing that ever happened to the Jews. Yeah, because the religion itself is very uncomfortable with the implications of center. But what the Bible, what the Torah then shows as a sanctuary that in some way is typical for the Jewish sensibility, even when it takes on the traditional form, is the tent sanctuary, the sanctuary that moves, the tabernacle that moves through the desert. And here also we have then, the title of this image is called Sinai. And Sinai, we have here the 10 Commandments. You see the camp of the Israelites around it. But the interesting thing, of course, of Sinai is that it never became a holy place in the Jewish tradition. You know, the Jews, after the exodus of Egypt, go to Sinai. They get basically their laws. They turn their back to it, and they never go back. There are no pilgrimages to Sinai. Yeah? Which is very unlike any other tradition, where when you have a place where a very important sacred event happened, a foundational event happened, then you basically make it into a center of pilgrimage. You return to it. You create a sanctuary there. The Jews never did. The first ones who did were the Christians. So Jewish space is in fact kind of paradoxical because it's not really about space, but it's about events, it's about time. The first thing that the Bible identifies as holy is actually the Shabbat. It is a day in the week. It's not a place. Yeah, and so this kind of transformation of space into time is one of the most fundamental characteristics of Judaism, which of course also allows it to survive. Because when you understand time, then also events in time can be coped with. And then, of course, the other immense invention in Judaism is this idea that if you do need some place to assemble, the synagogue, and here this is called shtetl synagogue, that in some way that what is sacred is actually not the place itself. So you can have a synagogue anywhere. We can have a synagogue right now here. We have a synagogue right now. We have enough people here. We have a minyan, so to speak. The synagogue at Babi Yar is a synagogue that demands a minyan to be opened. Just 10 people, but it is about the fact that it's ultimately in the presence of other people that holy space is created. Not that it is given, not that it already exists and that you arrive there. You create it every time and uncreate it every time by the time that you leave. So you see, these are absolutely magnificent images. And what was the pleasure of working with Mark on this project, and of course with Nick and the rest of the team, is there's always a little bit of a tension between my explanations and Mark's images. These are not illustrations, they're called illuminations. And so here, this is a drawing by Mark Potwell from 1980, and as you see, it is kind of prophetic, because it looks forward to the Babi Yar synagogue. So this is an image by him, and I will be coming very quickly to the end. This is called disputation. Judaism was faced in the Middle Ages with this continuous attack by Christians who said Judaism has no place in this world anymore because Christ has come and has saved us. And here you see then symbolically represented the church, in this case the church on the market in Prague, and then the Jews' answer to that, which is the book, which is the Torah. And again, it is you need to tease out a meeting, but in some way the Torah is our sacred place. The book is our sacred place. And here a very interesting drawing again, which is about the Talmud, the page of the Talmud, and Manuel would be able to say much more about. In fact, I'm very much inspired by the work of Manuel on this, which is all about that in fact the interest is not in the core text, which would be an old text of the Mishnah, but it's in the periphery, it's in the discussion. And the discussion was not really meant to be ended. People, the continuous discussion of things, it's in the periphery. And that's where the adventure happened. Even if sometimes we do think that the walls that surround us is the Torah, and in a sense it is, but it is of course always also the continuous engagement with a world which often is hostile. But if it wasn't for this cap of this SS man sitting on top of the crown of the Torah, in some way I don't think that we would have today this incredible renewal and rethinking of what Judaism can be. I mean, in some way destructive creation is a very important part of Judaism itself, even if the catastrophe, of course, for the individuals who are touched by it and the communities is indeed a catastrophe. So I would like to end then with this image. I think I'm ending with it. So that's in some way the paradox of Jewish space. These are, it's called broken tombstones, and this, of course, is the landscape of Eastern Europe, where of course, we can even talk about Babi Yar itself, where there are a couple of displaced, broken tombstones that are lining up from the administration building of the Jewish cemetery towards the synagogue. And in some way, what this image, of course, represents is this paradoxical identity in the history of Judaism, but also in Jewish space, between the space of redemption and the space of perdition. And I think that is, at least for me, the great challenge in working with Babi Yar, that it is not merely a negative space in terms of Jewish history. It is also, I think, a defining space for the Jewish future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now I would like to invite Manuel Hertz to take the stand and share with us his project. Thank you.